Okay, I am here with Paul Koch, the composer of Redux Redux, which was a huge hit at South by Southwest. When I was there, this was basically the number one film that everyone was talking about. Major word of mouth. Thank you for speaking with me, Paul.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nick.
Were you at South by?
I was there, yeah. Yeah, were you?
Had you been there before?
No, my first time. I was just there for the weekends, that first weekend, but it was a blast. I got the itch. I see why people love it there. The energy was great. There's so many good films there too. I didn't see hardly any of the ones that I wanted to, but yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, it was also my first time. It was just magical. I feel like now I just want to go back forever, every single time, because I just met so many cool people, and it's like you'll be in line. I was talking to this guy in line for so long, and then it's like minutes into the conversation, people are just like, "Oh yeah, like I like shot this movie that's in the festival," or like everyone's just kind of mingling, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, even like living in Los Angeles, you don't get that concentration of people who have just worked on a film and it's coming out and they're excited for people to see it and they want to talk about it. You don't get that really anywhere other than a festival like this.
Yeah, and I think, congrats on the film. I also had too many movies to see, and I was like just running everywhere trying to see everything, but your film was hands down the one that the most people were recommending, and they were like, wow. I feel like as the festival went on, like more and more people were talking about it, especially on TikTok. So yeah, I eventually was able to see it, and I'm going to go back to see it on the big screen because it's great.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we're so proud of it. I think it turned out, it exceeded all of our expectations. We're just so proud of it.
So let me just ask you, I want to go back a little bit. I like to ask for sort of the background lore. Where did this job come from? Have you always been a musician, a film lover? Where did it come from?
Yeah, I've always loved music. I've always been a musician. Going back from the days of hiding from my piano teacher when I was 8 years old or whatever, which I now regret. I wish I were better at the piano. I shouldn't have run away from it.
Me too. I quit piano lessons and I wish I never did.
Yeah, and I think part of it is like the style of teaching when we were kids was more focused on scales and technique and stuff. And now with places like School of Rock, like they hand you a guitar and you're playing the Ramones on day one. Like my niece just started guitar lessons, and if I had lessons like that, I would have been so much more into it. But yeah, so I did that. I was in all the bands in school. I was in the jazz band. I had a ska band in high school.
Oh, wow.
And I never thought it was something that you could like do, Mm-hmm. And we used to, my high school band, I grew up in Rhode Island, and we used to go up to Boston to see John Williams conduct the Boston Pops, playing all of his music. And we used to play his medleys and stuff. So I had this awareness of like, people are composers. But it wasn't really.
Have you gone to any of his big LA screenings when they do like the live orchestra with the movies?
Yeah. I've been to the Hollywood Bowl thing twice, where he's conducting. This last year, he couldn't do it, but David Newman conducted for him, and it's still a great show. I mean, the music speaks for itself. Yeah, yeah. I've been to that, and I've been to not his scores, but I've seen some of the later Harry Potter movies there at the Hollywood Bowl live to. With the live orchestra, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so I went to college. I wanted to be a recording engineer. That was my goal. I went to a recording studio, and that's where I saw myself. But I was in bands, and I just always had trouble with people being as into it as me. And so I discovered I took the film scoring 101 class in college, and I was like, oh, this is something that you can kind of like do on your own. You don't need to rely on other people to be interested in it. And then I started to hear the music of John Bryan and his scores.
Oh,
he was just such an influence on me. Like, this is a small band. Like, this is something that's really attainable to be able to do. You don't need to have the full orchestra. You don't need the Boston.
Did he do Punch Drunk Love?
He did, yeah.
Which is like the most beautiful. I mean, I feel like everyone uses that to temp with because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, there were three when I first started. There was I Heart Huckabees, Punch Drunk Love, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And all three of those, I didn't realize there was all him. And I was like, whatever genre this is, I don't know how to explain it, but whatever genre of score this is, I love it. This really speaks to me. Then I find out it's all the same guy. And, that was like a big spark. Like, you can do this. So I moved out to LA after college, and I got an internship with a couple of composers, and, since then it's just been really just working with that network of people. It's just people that I've met through that very first internship, who've been the majority of my work, with the exception of Matt and Kevin McManus, who I grew up with. We grew up together, where my aunt and his uncle were, my uncle and his aunt were married.
Oh, wow.
So we've known each other our whole lives. We grew up together. We went to high school together. So our working relationship goes back almost 20 years now to, their Emerson short films.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so with the exception of them, who I've just known and been lucky to continue to work with, it all kind of came from that first internship in LA.
That was literally going to be my next question, is how you linked up with them. So you've been working with them a long time. Process-wise, how has that evolved? Like, I would imagine you guys have sort of a shorthand now, and you kind of understand their tone. Like, do you guys kind of just like really have a good sense of working together now? Like, do they send you temp stuff, or are you kind of like, I know exactly what you're going for? How has that process evolved?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that I did, I had no idea what I was doing. And
they probably didn't either, right?
Yeah, well, honestly, they've been making movies since they were way younger than that. They've got movies from when they're like 10 years old.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like fully edited short films that their sister still starred in. So, I mean, they had, by the time they went to college, they had a decade of experience making movies. And their mom's an actress. She was, so it's kind of like in their blood. But so I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I would guess how, I'd be like, okay, this scene is 38 seconds long. So I'd write something, and then without looking at the movie, because I didn't know how to do that yet. And then I'd export it and I'd put it in, like, okay, it's a little bit too long. So I'd bring it back, and then I'd, make the tempo a little bit faster and put it in. And, that's definitely evolved. We kind of linked back up, 10 something years ago, and they were producing 13 cameras, and from that point on, that kind of like started our less of our school working relationship, but our professional working relationship. And they've always been so open. They give good references. They do temp the movies, but I think I love temp scores. I think a lot of people are hesitant to them because you don't want to sound too close to it. But I don't know where this joke comes from, but people say that talking about music is like dancing about architecture. That's the quote. It's like you can explain as much as you want what you want the music to be, but if you just put in a piece of temp music and be like, this is working because of the pace and because of this movement here, and I like the triumph in this part, that it speaks so much more than we can talk about. So I like to have them talk about the story and motivation and all that. And if they can, have some music that speaks to them, that's really helpful. I mean, one of my first instincts watching the movie, there's some like, I don't think it has any music now, but there's some like kind of road trippy scenes where they're both, Irene and Mia are in the car together. And I was hearing some kind of road trippy, lonely acoustic guitar, and I brought that up, and they were like, "No, we don't. There's something about acoustic guitar we don't like." And I was like, "Great, that's just more data for me." It took 4 or 5 movies to get that to that point of knowing that they don't like acoustic guitar, but we've got a great working relationship. They usually on the Block Island Sound, they would come to my studio every week. We'd just have a weekly meeting, and we'd sit together and we'd talk about the music. They've never really been the ones to like email me notes. It's always a conversation, and it really feels collaborative in that way. It's not just like turn down this, raise this. It's like they're sitting right here with me, and we're just talking about how to make the movie better. And
I
then
love
this
that
time
film,
was,
by the way. I love that film, and I always love seeing it pop up on like random Reddit posts where people are like, "This movie's so underappreciated." Like, it's great.
oh, I love it too. Yeah, I love it too. They're just like, and every movie they do is just a step up and a step up, and it just keeps getting better and better. And I tell them very clearly, I was like, I've made it this far, but like, I'm gonna hang on to those coattails as tightly as I can, because I know they're gonna just keep doing better and better and better things for a long time.
Yeah, and it seems like they have a lot of original ideas, but I wouldn't be surprised if after this movie they get handed some big, sci-fi IP or something, and then that's when you get to ride the coattails.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, they've told me some of the ideas of things they're working on. It's like everyone is like, oh, I would see that movie, Yeah. So yeah, I'm really excited to whatever they're doing next.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting what you say about the temp score, because when I was in film school, I would hear that a lot. Like the professors were constantly like, I love music. Like I'm kind of a musician for fun on the side. So like I always love pulling in music and temp, and they're always like, you're going to fall in love with it. You're pulling it in too early, but it's like, it does add this rhythm. It changes everything. Like it helps you see how the movie is going to eventually end up,
Yeah, there's the concept of temp love is it's a real one.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's I worked on a movie called Good Old Frida right here, which was temped with it's a documentary about the Beatles secretary Frida Kelly, and the entire temp score was Beatles music.
That's like the ultimate.
Yeah, like what am I going to do with that? And they managed, it was the first independent film to actually license Beatles songs. They got 4 in the movie, which was but a lot of that movie was me like, okay, how can I do the same thing, do like accomplish what they're trying to accomplish without it being Beatles music, which fits doubly because it's incredible music and it's so, thematic to the movie because it's about the Beatles and their secretary and their rise to fame and all that. So that was a time where the temp music was difficult, but obviously, if you're temping that movie, why wouldn't you put in Beatles music? It makes perfect sense. And they managed to license them. But most of the time, I just think it's a great guide. It's makes it so people who aren't musicians can really easily talk about what they like and what they don't like. Instead of saying, I don't really like this, like the high warbly, they can be like that thing right there. I don't like that, and I do like this. And I love how this speeds up here. And then my job, I can come in and make something original, make something new that has all the same kind of tent poles, and it has a interesting sound here. It doesn't have to be the same interesting sounds, but you've got these guideposts to lead you along the way. I just find it really, really helpful.
Yeah. I was just writing down the Frida movie, by the way, because I was like, I want to watch that. It sounds really cool. So this movie specifically, this phrase that I've been seeing on Letterboxd and on TikTok, which I do love, is sort of like lo-fi sci-fi is what I keep hearing people call it, which I think is cool because it's like the movie is so obviously a passion project, but it also, I think it's inspiring to filmmakers because it proves that you can make like a very grounded, practical sci-fi movie that doesn't cost like $100 million. And I feel like it's destined to go down with those films like Primer or like the movies that kind of just do really interesting world building with like I said, not like $100 million. So in translating that to the process of like creating this score, which is, there's synths, it's electronic, like, I'm just curious as like as a music nerd, what was your process on this? Like, were you using, was it all sort of like, modern technology you were using? Or were you using like retro synths? Like it has a cool sound to it. So I'm just curious.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if I learned the term lo-fi sci-fi from your TikTok or from Letterboxd or where, but it's new to me too. But it's true. Like I've been trying to think of how to best explain the type of sci-fi movies I love, and that's it. It's lo-fi sci-fi. If I can watch a movie where like you go into outer space and there aren't aliens there that are trying to blow up the universe, like that's a better movie to me. So yeah, this one really spoke to me in that way because it's such a personal, small story in this world that can, could be expanded into 1,000 other stories. Musically, it was a bit of both. I used some, a lot of modern synths, but I also used some some old classics, looking back to John Carpenter and the Terminator and stuff, and those kind of scores and films which I know are big references for Matt and Kevin too. And there's definitely moments where it gets a little bit more in that 80s synth horror kind of thing. But then also I love to kind of create synthy sounds out of organic stuff. So I do a lot of sampling in here, and then so I'll play a long violin note a bunch of times and then put it into a sampler, and then I can kind of treat it like it's a synth. I can put filters on it, I can pitch bend it, I can give it cool like pitch envelopes, and so I do that a lot with just trying to get organic sound sources with kind of synth techniques.
That's really cool.
I did it mostly for Block Island Sound, but I still use it all the time. Is I sampled a few different electric guitars. We played with an EBow, so you get these long sustained notes, and then put it into a sampler and made it so you're hearing basically 8 of the same note at any time. And if you push up a fader, they slightly detune from one another, kind of like a Swarmatron synth or just like a detune knob on a synth, but it's 8 of them or 10 of them or whatever. So you can have this steady, nice, pretty note or a nice, pretty chord, and then just turn a knob, and then it slowly, however you want it to, can turn into this really discordant cluster. So I do those kind of techniques a lot. And then with a movie like this too, like Matt and Kevin always talk about tension, like keep the tension. Even in those moments in between tension, things are unsettled. They're not, even when you could take a breath, like you're not out of the woods yet. So, a lot of that's like trying to find the ways to interestingly keep the tension and build the tension. So sometimes it's just, what's tense, like a note going up is tense, right? It's like the Joker theme from The Dark Knight. A note slowly going up, that's always tension, like a barber pole. So there's parts of that where it's just something's rising, and when that goes away, there's another thing rising. And then there's this, there's times where it's just nonstop rhythm, even, or just like a pulse that keeps going. Matt and Kevin referenced a scene from Boogie Nights for one of the scenes where it's just, there's this one little loop that John Bryan made out of his Optigan, this organ that just, I think it's like a 20-second loop.
I forgot he did that too.
Yeah. Crazy. And it goes for 10 minutes in the movie, just this 20-second loop, which is like boom, boom. And it's just this like old kind of vintagey bell sound. And so that was one of their references too, of like, this is a great way to have tension that never ends. Something's going wrong. Like Dirk is in bad spots right now, and same thing with Irene and Mia. You're seeing kind of their worlds crumble around them. So that's another thing that I did with this, but yeah, I just try to bring in the synth, but whenever I do it, with exceptions, I don't want to get too synth heavy. And so I've got, there's live strings in there. There's, guitars. There's just kind of instruments I've collected that I try to layer in. So it doesn't go full synth. It can keep that kind of organic nature.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like they are filmmakers as well that are also so interested in like the emotion of the story, which is like, I mean, all filmmakers should be interested in that, but there is, especially in Redux, like you get a lot of emotion out of it, which I feel like is also like when you match up that with a composer, then you start to get like some really interesting, moving filmmaking,
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes where, there's these monologues from Irene, and you can't go full emotion in it because there's context to what she's saying, right? And it's in the script, it's in the speech, but that there's these kind of underlying things that are going around. So that's always a fun place for me, is to try to find that balance of like, how am I following her story, but also, keeping in mind musically everything else that's going on, the danger they're about to face or the trauma that they've just gone through. And so that's always a fun place, to explore.
So you mentioned John Carpenter. We've talked about John Bryan. Are there other favorites that you often find yourself referencing or going back to or looking to for inspiration?
I guess it's just all Johns. John Williams too.
Yeah, all the Johns.
Powell. I think my main influences that way come from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I think they blew up at the perfect time in my life, which was very nice of them, where I had just gotten out of music school and I'd had rules drilled into my head about what film music should be. And then they come out and they do The Social Network, and it's cool and it's electronic and it's, it plays over multiple scenes, and they broke a lot of the rules that I learned, and it is amazing. It's an amazing score. I love it, and everything they've done since then too has just been unique and cool. And we're also taught, how to sound like John Williams or how to sound like these other composers. And here come people who just sound like themselves, and they're having so much success. So that also, they gave me the internal push to try to keep doing my own thing, and I don't need to give people what's expected and what's already been made, because why do that? It's already been made. So they were a big influence on me. John Bryan, as I said. Thomas Newman's always been a real favorite of mine. I think he's another person like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross who's so good at setting a mood. And it's, less about, we call it Mickey Mousing, but following all the things that are happening on screen. And if someone falls down, whoop, whoop. It's less about that. And it's just, you could have just a little, just a mood, a pad, a sound, a texture that puts you right in it immediately. And then these little piano notes on top of it are the punctuation, and they're following the story. But you're setting this overall, he's so good at just setting the overall mood. Another one I really love is Oliver Arnold's. I think he does some film, but he's also, he makes a lot of music on his own, and his approach to strings and string quartets and piano, I think, is really beautiful. And it comes out in his, more thriller drama scores, but it also comes out in just his beautiful music. And so when I am bringing in live strings into something, he's somebody who I kind of keep in the back of my head of what would Oliver Arnold's do here? And just try to make my own, make it my own way, but through what I've learned from him, from all the great music that he's made.
I love what you said about coming out of film or school and breaking the rules, because that's kind of like if there was a drinking game for my TikTok, it would be about how I talk about how there's no rules in art. But I get so many messages, and I hear from so many people who are in film school who are like, well, this is what my professor said we have to do, or okay, but I don't think I'm at the level where I should be breaking rules yet. And it's I understand, people want to learn the craft and then break the rules, but it's if you want to advance or do something that hasn't been done before, then you kind of have to throw some of that stuff out and just try to not think too much about what your professors told you about your craft,
yeah. I watched your TikTok recently about, not putting the cover page on the front of your script. And yeah, that really spoke to me, because it's true. It's these rules are there for a reason. You're taught it for a reason. You can't just, write your script on the back of napkins with crayons and expect people to take it seriously. But at the same time, if you do something slightly out of the rules, it's not going to make somebody not read your script. And in this case that you're talking about, it's screenwriters who are known, and they've got people pushing for them. And when somebody receives that script, they know what they're doing, and they can trust it. So knowing when to break the rules, I think, is equally important to knowing as to knowing how to break the rules. And yeah, that's been a mantra for me too. It's just, I think one of my embarrassing moments when I first came to LA, I was working with these composers, John O'Brien and Dave Kushner, who came out of rock and roll, basically. And, John had put a plug-in on this drum kit that's meant for a snare or something like that. It's a snare plug-in. And so I pipe up, because I'm this snot-nosed recent graduate. I'm like, oh, I think that one's actually for the snare, trying to be helpful. And he just looked at me okay, listen to it. It sounds good. And that was this is here I am, like 16 years later, and it still comes up in my brain of like, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. And it sounded great. What he did always sounded great. Just because he didn't go to music school and get the education I did means nothing for what kind of music you can make. It was good for me. I loved music school. It gave me tools. It gave me friends. It gave me a reason to have done all this research about what's come before. But yeah, I do. It's always been a mantra about breaking the rules and when to and how to. And I think the least interesting music to me is the music that follows the rules the closest.
Totally. So in terms of your next project and moving forward, like what is next for you? Is there a certain genre that you haven't worked in yet that you really want to work on, or where do you want to go next?
Well, that's a great question. And the next one I'm doing is a legal drama, like a courtroom.
Interesting.
Really tense. It's cool because it's about what's happening in the courtroom, and it starts basically with the closing statements, and then it's a lot about the jury deliberation, kind of 12 Angry Men, but it's really cerebral, and it's a lot of talking. It's people talking to each other and trying to change each other's minds. And so that one's been fascinating. And I've done more legal, like a Die Hard in a courthouse kind of a movie, which has elements of the legal process, but through the lens of an action movie. In terms of what I haven't done before, there's a ton. There's a ton. I love the variety of this job. That's one of the reasons why I love it so much. I did a TV show for Netflix a few years ago called We Are the Champions, and it was a collection of documentaries about strange competitions. So one was the cheese rolling in England, where you try to chase the cheese down the really steep hill. Another one was Russian dog dancing. It's people dancing with their dogs. Another one was hot chili pepper eating competitions. And through that, it's like every episode is completely different music. And I loved it. It's that being able to change gears is really exciting. So, I don't close the door to any kind of project. I love doing this lo-fi sci-fi, as you say. That's like a place where my heart really is. I've loved doing horror. I love doing documentaries. I love doing action films because that's a place where you really don't have to hold back and you just be loud and brash. And I love that. Maybe a rom-com is next for me. My dad always says that, I make music that he listens to and it just depresses him all the time. I was like, just do something happy. Please do something happy. So maybe a nice sappy, lovely rom-com is next for me.
Is pigeonholing a thing in composing, or is it kind of like people would it be happy to they just like your music so they'll put you on like a rom-com or something, or have you kind of gotten pushed into certain arenas?
It's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. I think I've worked with a lot of different composers who so I've gotten a lot of variety through that, just writing additional music for other composers. But yeah, I think it is a thing. Some people get kind of stuck in TV. Some people get stuck in film. Some people get stuck writing library music. But I think musicians can recognize that, you're just like one set of research materials away from being able to write the next thing. I've never been to Africa. I don't play any African instruments, but I worked on an African drama last year, the year before, and you just study up on the music, and you study up on the culture, and you listen to a ton of music, and then you can make something that I think is out of your wheelhouse, but in your musical wheelhouse. I think sometimes it's just bringing in a couple of instruments, and you have the music that you would have written, but now it's got some African drums in it, and that that can help ground it someplace. So yeah, pigeonholing is definitely a thing. But I don't think I'm there yet. I think I have the luxury of not having had huge success with anything. Yeah, you know what I mean?
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. So I haven't gotten stuck because people don't know me for one thing yet because they don't know me well enough. Right. So I'm just going to keep doing what I do, taking the opportunities as they come. I think, I've had the pleasure of working with Matt and Kevin for so long, and their movies they come from the same minds, but they have variety to them too, and so that helps. And then a director that I work with named Wes Miller, I've done. This is now my 4th action movie, thriller that I've done with him, and it's the same thing. It's working with the same people, but he has a way of, creating new types of films with new types of music out of each one. So I'm just going along for the ride. I've done music for slot machines. I've done music for the Disneyland hotel, the Star Wars hotel.
Oh wow!
I love variety. I hope it doesn't come across as like a jack of all trades, as a master of none kind of thing. But I just get excited about being able to change gears and do something new.
Awesome, man. Well, congrats on the new film. I'm excited for people to see it when it comes out properly. And thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me too. It was a pleasure.